Hi everybody, welcome to week 2 of the Quality Sewing Quilt Along. We're doing a quilt called Checkered Stars, and I'm so glad that you are here. So if you're not a big time quilter and you're not participating in our Quilt Along, that's okay, because I have tons of tips and tricks for you today. And then also, if you are here for the Quilt Along, yay, we're gonna have a good time. So I'm going to give a shout out to Vicki for a good job having your quilt blocks all done. She showed them to me yesterday and they're absolutely beautiful. And I hope those of you who are participating are also posting to social, like your Facebook or Instagram, wherever you might like to spend your time on social media, with the hashtag QSV Quilt Along. That way we get to see your beautiful blocks that you're working on. And so that's really fun. Now, another thing that you might want to do if you enjoy getting content like this is to subscribe to our channel. And then you'll know when we do some fun stuff, and hopefully you're having a good time sewing, because that's the point, right? It's having fun. Okay, so let's talk about the quilt along we're doing. So last week, we're going to take an overhead quick peek at the blocks that we did last week. We did the square blocks, the checkered blocks, and that was really fun. So we talked about how to get them nested together and how to get them nice and sharp corners, which we're going to review a little bit of that today. But hopefully you got yours done. Now, if you are just joining us for our quilt along, it's okay if you haven't done these blocks, because you can go back and watch week 1. And there's only 6 checkered blocks, so it's not like it's a huge big deal, right? So you can catch up very quickly and have a good time and join us for the rest of the process. So today, let's take a look at our block for today. We're gonna do the star block. So this is really fun. It's very similar to our checkered block in that it's a 4x4 block, and this one has, here's the block right here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 across, and 1, 2, 3, 4 down. But instead of just being all squares, we have half square triangles in the mix. So we're going to talk about that today. So now, if you have done your blocks for last week, they may look a little bit like this. This is the block that we did together last week. We did the checkered, and I'm doing a second one. So the original quilt is in a red, white, and blue, but you can use whatever colors you want. You can use scraps, which is really, really pretty fun. And mine that I'm working on now is meant to coordinate with this fabric right here. Okay, so I have one of my checkered squares that has the blue and the turquoise. Then I have another one that is the light pink and the dark pink, and another that is the light yellow and the dark yellow, which is really fun if you're working with a print, is to look at the colors that are in the print and pull out fabrics to coordinate with them. If you don't have the whole line, you just have the one piece, you can find things that read more as a solid that can coordinate with it. And we have 2 of each colorway for mine. I have 2 of this one, 2 of this one, and 2 of this one. You just need to have 6 total checkered square blocks, and then you're ready to go. So let's start talking about what we're going to do today. We're going to do a moment of review on getting your fabric prepped. So if you really want to know all about what to do with your fabric, last week we did talk about making sure that your fabric, making sure mine is straight, that the grain is running straight. I know I'm hiding for a second there. Then we talked about pre-starching, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. Now, I have mine folded in half, and let's take an overhead look, because what I'm going to do is you can see there's my edge right there. I'm going to pull that up, and I'm going to fold my selvage so it's parallel. And look, I'm dipping down there, aren't I? So I'm going to make sure I'm parallel with my folded edge, and now I should be good to make my nice straight cut. Just because it was cut off of the bolt in a certain way does not mean it is straight when you get it home. So make sure you starch your fabric and then find the straighted grain, which again referred to last week's lesson, and we're going to cut that guy off and have a nice smooth surface. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I am going to cut a 4-inch strip of fabric from my, my piece here. So when you're cutting your fabric with a ruler, and boy, there, let me tip it. We sure did have a glare there, didn't we? This happens to be a 6.5 wide ruler. It's a Quilter Select ruler, which has that nice frosted bits to it, which the frosted backside is actually a grip 'em side, so it doesn't slip around. But since it's a 6.5 inch ruler and I want 4 inches, I'm going to rotate it because from here to here I have 4 inches. And this side has the half, so I'm going to ignore that. And I would put this right on my 4-inch line, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4 that way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that way, so you can read left or right, which is one thing I really like with the Quilter Select rulers, is that you can line them up and read from left side or right side, so it doesn't matter if you're left-handed or right-handed or how you plop the ruler down. Now, the other thing that you want to do is find your line, and since we clean cut this one, that's the line I'm going to use to line up with my fabric. Okay? The other thing that I do when I'm cutting a strip is not just look at that, but I want to look at a horizontal line as well. So if you take a look, you can see like right here, here's a bold line here, and that's on 1 inch. Then the dotted line is a 1/2 inch. Okay, so every inch there's a bold line, every 1/2 inch there's a dotted line. Personally, I can see using the dotted line very, very well because in between each little dash, I can see the fabric peeking through. So a lot of times when I'm aligning my fabric on the horizontal, I will find a 1/2 inch marking and use that to make sure I'm straight this way and straight this way, and then we can cut a strip. Okay. Now I've already pre-cut a couple of strips, so I'm not going to cut this one because who knows what I'm actually going to use that for, but it's cute, right? Fabric is cute. Feel free to collect all that you want. Okay. All right. So that's really fun. Now I have some fabric that I have already cut down to the 4-inch sets. Now I'm going to show you a lot of information today, so you're going to get tons and tons of information hopefully today. And if you're a brand new quilter, great. Hopefully you're going to learn some good basic skills. If you're an experienced quilter, hey, enjoy the ride, right? And we're going to just have a great time together. Okay, so I have my white fabric and I have my light blue fabric, and neither one of these I'm using in my actual quilt, but I just have it here as sample pieces for you. So what you're going to do when you've straightened your fabric up like we just talked about, I want you to cut a strip that is 4 inches by width of fabric. Okay, width of fabric is, let me grab that fabric. So I'm going to, hold on a second, I'll be right back. Okay, so the width of fabric is selvage to selvage. Okay, so this is how it comes off the bolt with a selvage at one end and a fold at the other. So if you cut this way, this is width of fabric. Okay, so that would be, and it's standard between 42 and 44 inches is kind of the standard. Okay, let's go back and look at our pieces here. So here is our little bits and pieces, and these I've already cut the strips at 4 inches. So to make the star block, you need 4 blocks, 4 squares that are 4 inches, and you need 4 that are 3.5. So what I'm going to do is find my 4-inch, which is right here, and I'm going to align that on my fabric, the edge here and the edge here. Now, another thing to note, excuse me, is that you want to, you're going to Make sure they're lined up. And you're going to need 4 of the print and 4 of the background. So I have background and print going on here. I have 2 layers of print or color and two layers of background. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to align the left edge and the dotted line right here. You can see, look at that, my white is cut a little bit big, but we can fix that in a second. But this is my 4 inches, so I'm going to cut 4 inches. Now, since that one is a little bit long there, I'm just going to rotate it, and I'm going to cut this at 4 inches and get rid of that funny little extra spot. Okay, so now I have 2 of each, and we'll just pretend that I cut another set. Okay, the next thing you're going to do once you have your 4 inches of each fabric cut, you want to cut 2 at 3.5 inches. So what is 3.5 and 3.5? It's 7, right? So what I did on my strip is I found my 7-inch mark and I put that on the edge here, and then I went down to my 3.5 along one edge. So I've got my nice rectangle right here, and I'm going to chop that off and then chop this off. So now I have a 7 by 3.5. Okay. Now if you just pick up your ruler and just move it down to the 3.5 inch mark, and now I have a dotted line on both, then we can cut this, and we have our 4 3.5 inch squares of both, and I actually still do have enough to finish and make my 4 inch block right here. So we'll just put him back on and we'll cut him up, and then we have all of our pieces ready to go. Now, did you notice that I'm able to move my fabric around with the ruler? Because that grip on there, I can shift it and my fabric didn't distort or peek out or slip underneath the ruler. So I was able to trim it without actually moving the fabric, which is great. Okay, so you have all your pieces. That's all you need to make your block. Or, you know, so that's pretty cool. Okay, so let's start putting our block together. But we're going to talk about a little bit more now, and we're going to talk about pressing. So one thing we're going to be working with today is half square triangles. We're going to be doing some triangle blocks. So what we want to do before you cut your fabric, you want to starch your fabric. And there's a couple of reasons why we do that. One is that it makes, and kind of most importantly, is it does make the fabric more stable, and I'm going to show you that in a second. The other reason is because it will cause it to shrink just a little bit, which will help with the finished project, right? That you want your fabric a little bit pre-shrunk. So this I have not pre-treated yet. We're going to do that right now, and I have not tested it, so I don't know how much it's going to shrink, but I'm going to go ahead and get it nice and damp. And here, let me put the one next to it so you can see. See, this one's nice and damp, and it's ready to be pressed. So now I'm going to just let it set for a second so it's not quite as wet. Yeah. And then we're going to give it a nice little press. And this will get it to both shrink and it will dry the starch. If you want to, you can let it air dry a little bit longer than I did, so that way it is just a little bit drier before you get it on your iron. And notice I'm not having to use any steam because it's already damp, right? Okay, so now we cut these to 4 by 4, correct? So let's just take a look at this and see what measurement we have come up with now. So we'll move him back over here, and let's take our ruler and put it at the 4 by 4. Can you see? I don't know if you can see, but see how it's just oh, thank you. He's going to zoom in for us. And I'm going to go this way. Okay, so let's get that up there. It looks like this way it's pretty much the same, but look how it shrank in just a little bit. So those little bits is why you want to pre-starch your fabric, okay? All right, I'm going to move my ironing mat out of the way, and now let's talk about another reason, or another reason why we actually pre-starch the fabric. So you could probably, can you see, oh, let's go front, Chris. Can you see, look at this one is starched, this one's not. Look at the difference, taco, tortilla, you know, okay. So this one is a lot stiffer. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna I want to cut this in half. This is just an example, so it's not anything you're doing for your pieces necessarily. But here is my piece right here. Now, if we have, let me cut the other one too. When you have a square and it's a square and you cut it in half, the angle that you cut is 45 degrees. And so this is now on bias. So if we take a look at this, I'm going to slip that one and let me slip one of those out of the way. If we take this, can you see how it stretches? Look at that. Look at it stretch. Okay? Now, and I've messed with it and I played with it. Here's my original. Let me put my original on top of my one that I stretched and see if you can see. I don't know if you can see much, but this one bows a little bit and his size got altered ever so slightly. And when you're sewing this, if you stretch it like this, your pieces may end up being a little bit wonky at the end of your stitching. So this one is on bias. It still stretches, but look, he's not stretching as much, right? Because the starch has kind of fused, not fused, but kind of stuck the warp and the weft fibers together so it doesn't have as much stretch as this guy. Look at that. I mean, that's a huge difference between the two. Okay? So does that kind of make sense why we're doing the starching? Okay, so that's the main reason, is to have our pieces be stable. Okay, so now let's take a look at our bits and pieces here, and I have lots of bits and pieces. Okay, we're going to talk about half square triangles. Oh boy, howdy, are you in for a doozy of a day. Okay, so a half square triangle is simply half of the square is one fabric, half of the square is the other fabric. Okay, half square triangle, not hard. But if you want to end up with a finished 3.5-inch square, you don't start with a 3.5-inch triangle. Because if you start with a 3.5-inch triangle, this little bits come in. So take a look at how this is 3.5 inches right here. You have, oh, let me move it out. This is 3.5 inches here, so you have all this extra. Okay, so if you cut your squares at 3.5 inches, you're going to finish at 3 inches and some, but it's not going to be the right size. So here's the quilting math rule. If you want to take and make a finished 3.5-inch triangle or a finished 4.5-inch triangle, which would give you a 1/2-inch seam allowance, so it's a finished at 3 inches, right? Then you want to round up 3/8 of an inch from whatever your size is. Okay, so if I have with seam allowance it's 3.5 inches, I need to cut my squares at 3 7/8. I know, right? You love that. Everybody loves 7/8. No, we don't. But anyway, so then what you do is you can carefully sew right down this. You can sew, either cut it in half this way and have 2 units, or you can sew a 1/4 inch on either side. So let's talk about that. Let's go over here to the machine and we're going to talk about that. Now, I'm going to let me grab my ruler, because I want to put on my machine, I want to put on the angle tape on here. And what the goal is to have the red line, oops, here, let's go over here. Sorry, you can't see anything there. I want to have the red line in line with the needle of my machine and come down straight in front of it, not, you know, cockeyed, but straight. And then each blue line is a 1/4 inch away from the red line. So now we'll go back to the machine, and on my machine I have a line on the center of my needle plate, and then there's a 0 right there. So what I'm going to do is line up my tape with that 0 and that line on my needle plate, and I'm going to come out straight. Now, how do I know it's straight? I usually take a ruler and I'm going to align it with something else that's straight on my machine. Like, for example, the edge of my machine, or one of the guidelines on the front or on the needle plate. Just make sure you're straight, and then when you are, all you have to do, this is just tape, you just tear it off, and I'm going to cheat and flip it up and flip that little guide to the back, and now I have my nice straight line. Okay, so that's how you use that angle tape. Now, I am using the FOF icon because there's icon 2 because there's some things I want to show you on here. And before I show you the triangles, I want to tell you one of the reasons why I chose this machine. And right here you can see it. This is called a dual feed. It's actually a feed dog for the back of the machine, so, or for the top layers of fabric, and it's behind the foot. Another thing that's really cool about this machine, actually, let's go back to the shot you were just at, Chris. If you take a look at the feed dogs, let me get this on the other side. If you see, we have the two long feed dogs here, and then we have 3 shorter ones in the back. So those are awesome, but also in the front of the needle, we have 3 feed dogs right here in the front, which is going to give the machine the ability to grab onto the fabric before it gets to the needle. So it's going to give you feeding before you get there. But I'm going to go ahead and just stitch, and I do not have my dual feed engaged. So this is pretty much like generally any machine you might have, and I'm just going to sew a stitch. Okay, just sew a seam because I want you to see what the power of the dual feed is. So now when I flip this over, and I think this is the perfect camera, can you see the little wibble wobbles in the blue? So my white is flat, but the blue has a little bit of a wave to it. And normally we press this out make it, just kind of make it go away. But when you launder it, that will come back, because what has happened, and you can see right here, see how my white fabric is a little bit longer than my blue fabric, even though they were exactly the same size when I started. What happened is that as I stitched, the feed dogs were pulling the bottom layer of fabric through, and the resistance of the foot on the top fabric held the top fabric back, so that caused the bottom fabric to wrinkle or kind of pull in a little bit. Okay, so that's something we really don't want to have happen. If you are doing piecing, you want your piecing to be the same size, when you start, and the same size when you finish, and I've lined up now. And if you're doing a garment, you want them to be this, you don't want puckers in your side seam. Okay, so now I have engaged the dual feed. So now we have a feed dog on the top of the machine, and then it's feeding both layers, the top and the bottom, at the same rate of speed. Now, the dual feed is something you can get on a bunch of different machines, not just the top of the line. But look at how much more flat that blue is now compared to how it is over here with all those puckers. Okay, so if you're doing a project that has, 1,000,001 little pieces, and your blocks aren't coming out to the right size, go back and watch class number 1 of this quilt along, because we talked about how to get the right seam allowance, and 2, double check and see if do a test and see if your fabric is shifting. Okay, so now let's talk about our triangles. Here we have our little triangles. I've drawn a line from corner to corner, and this is a 3 7/8 inch piece of fabric. And I have moved my needle over one tick to the right hand side, so it's a little bit narrower. You can use a 1/4 inch foot if you like, but you also can use your little marks that you put on your bed of your machine here. I want to stitch a 1/4 inch on either side of this line. Okay, so I'm going to line up, let's see from the back, does that work? I'm going to line up with that blue line, the outside line here, and I'm going to bring it up, and I'm going to make sure that I'm down here that it's pointing at that blue line as well. I also do like to work with my needle down. So when I stop, the needle will stop down in the fabric. Okay, so then we can just stitch our line on one side. And now I'm going to go ahead and put in a follower, so that way it controls all the little tails and I don't have any messy tails as I go along. And so when you put a fabric in first, it's called a leader, and then when it's on the other side, it's a follower. So now we can reverse the side, but what I'm going to do is just turn on my projection. And I know you're going to be able to see that better from the back side, but what this is it's a projector, and I've set it at 1/4 inch. Let me put my foot down so you can probably see them a little bit better. So I put it down on 1/4 inch. So I'm going to align that with my blue line. Isn't that funny how your view makes that disappear, doesn't it? But the line is still there. But I'm going to align that right on top of my drawn line so I can actually see what I'm doing, because my fabric is covering up my stickers. So I really do like having the option of having the projected line right here on the fabric. Now there are several machines that have projected lines. Pfaff, Viking, Brother, Baby Lock, and even Bernina have a style of a projected or a laser. So that's something that you might look into if you think that that would help you. And if you have one of the machines that have it, my goodness, start using it if you haven't already. Okay, so now we have our line drawn with our stitches on either side. So now let's go back over here to our cutting board, and we are going to cut this guy in half. So I'm just going to lay my ruler down there, and we're going to cut it in half. So 1 square of my main fabric, 1 square of my print fabric is going to yield 2 half square triangles. Now when you press these, you're going to press one of the seam allowances to the print side or their colored side. And this is, again, we went over pressing quite a lot last week in week number 1. So take a look at that. And then the next one I'm going to do is I'm going to press it to the opposite fabric, because these guys need to nestle together and they need to nest. So now we have the two squares right there. Okay, very good. All right. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I want you to take a look at what we have finished here. Let me move this out of the way and let's take a look. So we cut these at 3 7/8, correct? And our goal is to have a 3.5 inch finished square. This ruler is 3.5 inches, and if I put it down on one of my squares, this one I got lucky. It's not quite 3.5 inches. It's a little bit skinny. So you have to be very careful if you're adding that number to make it the 7/8, okay? Because you're going to be dead on or a little under. So I want to show you how I prefer to do them, because I don't like it when they don't fit. Okay, so what we're going to start with here is where are my squares? Right here. I have 4-inch squares. So I have a 4-inch square of my blue or my teal and a 4-inch square of my turquoise, and I have 2 of each. So I'm going to go ahead and take this now over to the sewing machine, and I have my guideline on my projected guideline, so I can use that and I don't even have to mark, which is another beautiful thing of using the guidelines, is I just can sew and have it stitch right there on that mark. And let's get my little follower in here. Okay, and now I'm going to trim him off, and we're going to reverse him to the other side, and we're going to stitch again. So here is my, I'm at 1/4 inch, and we're just going to stitch him. Okay, so now let me run him through. Okay, we'll trim them off. So if you use leaders and followers, it's going to give you a much cleaner block. So when you are putting your pieces together, you don't have a lot of strings. Okay, so let's go back over here to, we're just going back and forth all over the place, but we're going to go back here to our cutting mat here, and I'm going to trim him in half again, and then we'll press him. And you will see that there is a difference in the size, which I really appreciate. Okay, so we're going to do, again, we're going to take one of the seam allowances and press toward our background fabric. And remember, we're pressing, not ironing. We're not ironing. We're going to press and get them set nice. Some steam, a little steam goes a long way. And then the other one, we're going to press toward our colored fabric. And again, that's going to help us with our nesting of our blocks. And you're going to see how that works here in a minute. So I've got him all nice and pressed. And now let's take a look at the size that we have now. So we rounded up a little bit on size. So we can trim this down because look at my ruler. My ruler is actually a little bit smaller than the actual fabric. So we're going to trim him up, and I want to show you how to lay him out. And I'm also going to, we're going to use this rotating mat. If you don't have the ability to have a mat that will let you, or a ruler that will let you not distort the fabric when you're trimming up, it's really good to use a rotating mat. And this is the one by Sew Tights. It's 11 inches, so it's really a convenient size to use because when you're trimming, that way, wherever it is, it's in a convenient spot. Okay, so now let's take a look at the ruler here. I'm going to grab a solid piece of fabric and put underneath here so you can see the markings on the ruler. Can you see right here how there is a diagonal line that goes from corner to corner? Most rulers that are good quality rulers have a diagonal line. Now that diagonal line we're going to have match up with the seam that we have on our piece. We're wanting to have a finished 3.5 inch square, and the ruler I'm using is a 3.5 inch ruler, so it's absolutely perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and trim one side, get rid of that, rotate it. And notice how that keeps us from having the fabric shift out from underneath the ruler, and we don't have to reposition it, because when you're truing up a block, it's really important that you're able to true up the block and not have anything shift, because then you have to true up again. And having used a 4-inch piece of fabric, we have very little waste, but we have a perfectly squared up block. Okay, so let's square up the other one real quick. And Ken, I see that you say that you were a little bit tardy today. That's okay. We're glad you're here. And you will be able to re-watch this video later, and as with everybody. And then also, if you'd missed week 1, then go back and catch the information that we went over there, because I'm trying to put as many tips and tricks in here as I can so you can be comfortable making stuff. And we're also doing kind of some basic stuff, but my goodness, if you can cut angles or make angled blocks like a half square triangle, and you can do squares, you're going to be able to do just about any type of quilt. And again, there's the only little bit of waste that I have, and then let's look at how to put those together. Okay, and by the way, at home, I have my rotating mat right next to my sewing machine, so I can always true up my little blocks as I go, and it's so convenient. Oh, and also with this one, I should have mentioned, if you press down, it's very sturdy on the table because it has some grip on the back side. But the other thing I should mention is that it is magnetic. So if you're doing an intricate block, you can actually magnetize any ruler right down to the mat itself. And you can also get the ruler that is already magnetic and you can use that, and that sticks to the ruler or to the mat as well. So that's pretty cool. But this is a really fabulous one, and like I said, it's 11 inches, so it's a really handy size. Okay, so now we have our little units here, and this is where I want to, we're gonna really zoom in here in a second, because we're doing that star, the star block. And so these are going to be the points of our star. So when you press one seam allowance to your print side and one to the background side, that will give you your seam allowances going in the opposite direction. So we're going to take those pieces and put them together. And do you see how the seam allowance is going? Can we get it even tighter in, Chris? Let's get way in there. Okay, that's beautiful. Okay, so we have the seam allowances going that way on this piece, and they're going this way on that piece. So here's what they do. When you have your pieces going the opposite direction, when you line them up, they kind of lock right in place. Can you see which is the angle right there? So you have them lined right up on top of each other, and that is called nesting. We did that with our squares, and we did that with, we're going to do that with our points. So I'm going to get my pins. Now, when you're choosing a pin, get some that like these that have a glass head. Why a glass head? Because they resist heat. So if you press using them, it's going to not melt onto your fabric. Okay, so now before I put the pin in, I'm feeling this, and I'm feeling that I have an even smooth surface from one side to the other. Okay, so then I'm going to pin in perpendicular to the line that I'm going to sew. Okay, and then I'm going to come down here, match my corners really nicely, and grab a pin. The other thing that you want to look for in a pin is that they're a nice fine pin, that they have a nice fine point and they will go through your fabric easily. When I started doing quilts, this is a long time, like 30 years ago, I got some things that were called quilting pins, and they're really super long, and they have these big yellow heads on them. Well, those heads are plastic, they melted, and the pins are so long and thick they actually don't work very good. Okay, so now let's go back over here, and we're going to do our 1/4 inch, which I have my projected guideline set at a 1/4 inch, and then also I have the little tape on the bed of the machine, and I'm going to stitch, and then I'm going to stop with my needle down, pull out my pin, and I actually have a little wool mat right here, so I can just stick my pins right into it, so that way they're handy, and they also, it won't scratch the bed of the machine. Okay, so now I'm going to get over here. When I get close to my pin, I'm going to stop and then get rid of my pin, and we're going to keep going. So now, here's our little part of our star points. Okay, so let's come back over here, and then we're going to start to assemble our stars. So I have my guy right there, and I'm going to open him up, and there is my really cute little star point, which I sewed backwards. So make sure you sew it so you have star points, not a big old goose. But that's okay, because you know we have seam rippers and things like that. When you're doing this, you're going to want to have your seams going in certain directions. You can use the roll and press, which is nice because then you're not permanently pressing with an iron into your fabric. And so then actually, why don't we should we just resew this? Let's just resew it. And I'll show you a quick trick on getting how to take out that seam. So I'm just going to, because I sewed the wrong side, I'm just going to sew this side really fast. It won't take us but a second. Life happens, right? Do you ever do this at home? I'm sure you do. If you don't, wow, I need to come to your house and sew. Then I'll show you how to do all things kind of wrong, because that's all how I do. I do lots of stuff wrong. Okay. Really quick, now I'll show you my trick for getting a seam undone. This is the seam we want, this is the seam we don't want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my seam ripper. You have to be very careful with this. A seam ripper is flat. See how it doesn't bow, right? Because it's flat. I'm going to take him and I'm going to stick him in the seam. Let's start with the the non-seamy side, and I'm just going to take out a couple of stitches. Then I'm going to turn it this way, and I'm going to hold, see how I have my fingers kind of flat? I'm going to hold it and pinch, lightly pinch the seam, keeping that fabric flat. And then I'm going to slide this in here, and I take these two fingers and I grip the fabric, and I take the seam ripper and I put it in my hand here, and I push, but I'm keeping my fingers, keeping that flat so the seam ripper doesn't deviate from the straight of the seam. And now, voila, it's unstitched, and that was fast. Okay. Now look, I got points. Okay, we're happy, but I don't want to, I'm not going to hit this with steam. I'm going to use the roll and press just to get him a little bit open, because here's what we're going to do. We are now going to take him and we're going to start building our block. So we have our points. Here, let me do this. I'm going to bring him back over here so you can see him. Okay. So here we're going to start building our block. So this guy is going to go here, right? And then I have a square here and a square here. Okay? Then in the center, you have two squares together, and then two squares together the opposite way. And I know that it looks like this guy's really bigger, but that's because we have seam allowances that haven't been taken out of him yet. And then you're going to have another one of these units here, another one of these units here, and another one of these here. Okay? However, you don't need to sew them together like this right away. Look at and do rows. And in the instructions that you're going to download, it's going to show you how to lay it out in rows. So you'll have one row here, which will have a half square triangle here, and you sew that row together, this row together, then this row together, and then you put them all together. Okay? Now, you have an alternate that you can do. If you're working with a fabric like I am with the campers, maybe you want to have all your campers here. So if you're going to do that, then maybe instead of having two 3-inch finished squares, okay, because that's what this will finish up when you sew it, is 3 inches and 3 inches. So 3 and 3 is 6, and then a 1/4 inch and a 1/4 inch is 6 1/2. You can actually take and add your campers and cut a 6 1/2 inch square, and you can have your campers be the center. So instead of piecing, you can make it solid. Okay, so you're going to have options of what you want to do. And then you can just put the rest of your guy together, and you're going to end up with the most fun blocks. And these are the blocks that I have done for this week. So I have my 2 pinks, I have my light yellow, my dark yellow, and I'm going to have my light and my dark teal. Okay? All right. One more thing I want to share with you, which is, I think, pretty cool, is if you want to do more than just 2 triangles at a time, 2 half square triangles at a time, we're going to do now 8 half square triangles at a time. So what you're going to do, instead of having a piece of fabric that's a 4-inch square, you're going to double it in both directions. So 4 by 4 by 4. So that's 8 inches square. Okay, and instead of just sewing down one side, you're going to sew down both angles of the of your fabric. So I'm going to take this, and let's just draw another quick little line. You can use a friction pen, which is really great. I'm going to use a ballpoint pen so you can see it, but it doesn't really matter what you use here, because this is this will not be in the quilt. It's going to be a trimming line. So I'm going to line those up, and we're quickly going to just stitch this together. Again, having our line be on that 1/4 inch mark. Now this is much bigger than my tape is, so it's really nice having that projection. And we're just going to sew on either side of each one of these diagonal lines. Now when I come to the end, I'm going to cheat a bit, and I'm going to raise my needle up out of the fabric, and I'm going to pull and get him coming back the opposite way. So a little bit different than what we did before. And if you're doing multiples, you can always chain piece as well. Okay, so we're just going to stitch him down. And this line is really handy. I'm not even really having to pay much attention to anything except for that. Another thing, if you have a machine that has great feed dogs like this one does, you will notice that it actually pulls very straight into the machine, and you don't have a lot of babysitting that you need to do to the fabric because it actually feeds very straight. Okay, so almost done with this one. You're going to love this. So if you're doing the checkered centers of the stars, then consider doing it this way. It is not in the instructions this way. We wrote the instructions just very kind of easy one way, but you have all the tips that we're doing here. And if you do it, 1 8-inch piece of fabric will give you all of the squares that you need. Okay, all of the half square triangles. Okay, so now we're going to take that, trim him off, take him back over here to our mat, and we're just going to cut him in half. Well, first of all, before I do that, not the diagonal way, let's cut him in half the halfway. So we're going to square him up 4 inches one way, get him lined up. We're going to cut 4 inches that way, and then we want to carefully lift the ruler and go 4 inches this way. So we do the halves and the square halves first. And now we're going to go and cut on all the diagonals. And this will give us our 8 separate points. And for each star, you're going to need 8 half square triangles. So this is a really easy way to do 8. Okay, kind of fun, huh? All right. Now, if you have any questions, please let us know. And I hope you're going to have fun with this block. It's really a fun and easy one. And I also want to challenge you, because I know everyone is so busy. If you are busy and you don't have time to sew, I challenge you to find like 20 minutes in the first, like 20 minutes in the morning. Just sew for 20 minutes. And then that's going to give you, by the end of the week, you're going to have so much done that you're going to be just loving it. So that one I did toward the white. This one I'm going to do toward the blue. And then I have my seam allowances going in the opposite direction. So when I want to build my points, when I put them together, they will nest. It'll make it nice and easy. But before I do that, I'm going to take my 3.5-inch ruler and I'm going to trim them up and make sure they're 3.5 inches. And then when you get your block assembled, you want to trim up your blocks as well. So your finished block should be 12.5 inches. Okay, so if you have a 12.5-inch ruler, all you need to do is set it down and make sure that it's centered and you're good to go. Now on mine, I have very little that needs to be trimmed off, if anything, and some of it is just threads. So just take those threads off and clean them up. And then that's really pretty handy. And you can just do that all the way around all 4 sides. And then you have your blocks trued up. Be careful if you're using a smaller ruler. You don't just want to arbitrarily cut things off. You want to make sure that the whole thing is your finished 12.5 inches. Okay? All right. So I think that's all I have for you. Next week we're going to have a lot of good time. We're going to talk about the long bits. We're going to put our rows together. We're going to talk about sashings and borders, and we're going to put it all together and see how that works. But I look forward to seeing you next time. And remember, if you want to see more content like this, or you want to know when we're doing some fun stuff like this, either both. Join us live on Tuesday mornings for our How Do I series at 10 a.m. Pacific, just like you are right now, and go ahead and subscribe to our channel so that way you get notified when we do something fun. And we invite you to come join our family and have fun with us, and make sure to hashtag QSV Quilt Along so we can see your progress. I love seeing your fabric choices and what you've been up to. So make sure you do that either on Facebook or on Instagram, wherever you like to post your pictures. And I look forward to seeing you next week, and have a great time sewing.